Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone.
When I say the word narcissist, many of you already feel the weight of it in your chest. Because you've been there. You've walked into conversations that felt like a trap. You've tried to please someone who only took more. You've bent over backward hoping they would finally see you, love you, respect you. And every single time, you ended up drained, doubting yourself, and wondering why kindness never seemed to work. Let me tell you the truth. Being endlessly nice to a narcissist doesn't heal them. It only harms you. Niceness without boundaries is not compassion. It's self-abandonment. And you deserve better. So today, let's talk about what to do instead. Not out of bitterness, but out of strength, self-respect, and the courage to protect your own heart. We grow up hearing, be nice, be polite, don't make waves. And as children, those words shape the way we think about love, connection, and even our worth. Somewhere along the way, we start believing that being nice is the highest form of goodness. That if we're agreeable, if we're pleasant, if we smile through discomfort, people will love us. They'll stay. They'll approve of us. And when you're dealing with someone who is manipulative, self-centered, or even narcissistic, this belief becomes a trap. Because what happens? You start offering parts of yourself, chipping away at your voice, ignoring your gut instincts, all in the name of being nice. And here's the truth. Niceness and kindness are not the same thing. Niceness is a performance. It's about keeping the peace at all costs. It says, I'll make myself small so that you don't feel threatened. I'll hide my needs so you can feel powerful. Niceness is survival, not love. Kindness, on the other hand, is rooted in honesty, courage, and respect, not just respect for others, but for yourself too. Kindness says, I see you and I see me. And both of us matter. Kindness doesn't abandon truth to avoid conflict. Kindness doesn't silence your needs just to keep someone else comfortable. But when you've been conditioned to equate sacrifice with goodness, it's almost impossible to tell the difference. I'll give you an example. A woman I once worked with told me she had spent years in a relationship where her partner belittled her, dismissed her opinions, and demanded constant attention. Every time she tried to speak up, he'd accuse her of being selfish or cold. And so she learned to be endlessly nice. She laughed at jokes that hurt her. She apologized for things that weren't her fault. She stayed quiet when she wanted to cry out. She told me, I thought if I just kept showing him I was kind, one day he'd realize I was worth loving. But here's what really happened, the more she sacrificed, the more he took. The more she gave up her voice, the louder his became. That's the lie of confusing kindness with sacrifice. True kindness has limits. Sacrifice without balance becomes self-erasure. And let me be clear, you don't have to lose yourself to prove you're a good person. Narcissists, and I don't just mean in romantic relationships, but in workplaces, families, friendships, thrive on people who confuse kindness with submission. They know that if they can guilt you into believing that saying no makes you mean, you'll keep saying yes. If they can convince you that standing up for yourself makes you difficult, you'll stay quiet. And over time, you start to believe that protecting your own heart is an act of cruelty. But the most dangerous part of this cycle isn't just what they take from you. It's what you begin to believe about yourself. You start thinking, maybe I am selfish. Maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe I don't deserve better. That's what happens when you confuse sacrifice with kindness. You lose your compass. You stop trusting yourself. And let me tell you, I have seen this play out in some of the most capable, loving, wholehearted people I know. People who would bend heaven and earth to be there for others, but who can't stand the thought of disappointing someone even when that someone is hurting them. And the truth is, if your kindness requires you to constantly betray yourself, it's not kindness anymore. It's compliance. There is nothing noble about shrinking so someone else can shine. There is nothing virtuous about silencing yourself so someone else can feel powerful. That's not love. That's control. And yet, so many of us cling to this performance of niceness because we're terrified of what will happen if we stop. What if they get angry? What if they leave? What if they say we're ungrateful or unkind? But here's the paradox. The moment you stop performing niceness and start practicing real kindness, the kind that includes your own needs, your own truth, your own worth, is the moment you actually step into courage. Because being honest about what hurts you, what drains you, and what is no longer acceptable is the deepest act of kindness you can ever offer yourself. So what does this look like in practice? It looks like saying no without apologizing for it. It looks like telling someone, that comment was hurtful, and I won't allow it, even if they roll their eyes or call you too sensitive. It looks like refusing to keep explaining your boundaries to someone who has no intention of respecting them. It looks like realizing that the relationship, the job, or the friendship that requires to constantly sacrifice your peace isn't sustainable. And then choosing yourself, even if it means walking away. Does this mean you stop being generous? That you stop showing love, compassion, or care? Absolutely not. But it means you stop giving from a place of fear. Fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of being misunderstood. And you start giving from a place of strength. That shift changes everything. Because then your kindness isn't about proving your worth. It's about honoring it. And let me tell you something important. Not everyone will like it when you make that shift. People who are used to you being endlessly nice will push back. They will call you selfish, difficult, or changed. And they're right. You have changed. You've stopped confusing kindness with sacrifice. You've stopped abandoning yourself. You've stopped giving your power away under the disguise of love. At the end of the day, the measure of kindness isn't how much you can endure. It isn't how small you can make yourself. The measure of kindness is whether you can look yourself in the mirror and know I honored my truth. I respected my boundaries. I showed compassion without betraying myself. That is real kindness. And here's the beauty of it. Once you stop confusing kindness with sacrifice, you open the door to relationships where kindness flows both ways, where love isn't conditional, where respect isn't demanded but offered freely, where you can give without fear and receive without shame. So if you take nothing else from this, take this: being nice at the expense of your soul isn't love, and it isn't kindness. Stop sacrificing who you are just to keep the peace. The world doesn't need a quieter version of you. The world needs the kind of kindness that stands tall, speaks truth, and loves fiercely, starting with yourself. People often think that boundaries are harsh. That setting limits means you've built a wall, that you've closed yourself off, that you're no longer loving or kind. But the truth is, boundaries are not walls. They are doors. And a door is a powerful thing, isn't it? A door lets you choose what comes in and what stays out. It gives you the power to welcome love, respect, and trust, while refusing to let harm, manipulation, and cruelty walk unchecked into your life. When you've been caught in the orbit of a narcissist or anyone who takes more than they ever give, boundaries become even more essential. Because here's what happens without them: you get swallowed whole. Your time isn't yours. Your peace isn't yours. Your decisions aren't yours. You become a puppet in someone else's story. And little by little, you lose the sense that your life belongs to you. I remember a conversation with someone who had spent years trying to manage a relationship with her narcissistic sibling. She said, "I feel like if I don't answer the phone, if I don't show up every time they demand, if I don't rescue them from every crisis they create, then I'm a terrible person. I'll be labeled the selfish one in the family." And my heart broke listening to her, because I knew what she hadn't yet realized. Every single time she dropped her life to manage theirs, she was teaching them a dangerous lesson. That her time, her body, her soul were negotiable. That's what life looks like without boundaries. You are always available, always accessible, always pliable. And the narcissist knows it. They know that you don't have doors, just an open gate they can walk through at any time. But here's what boundaries actually do. They say, I value my peace. I value my worth. I value my time. And if you can't respect that, then you don't get access to me in the same way. Boundaries don't punish people. They protect your well-being. They are not weapons, they are safety nets. They are not about pushing people away, but about creating the conditions where real love and respect can actually grow. Think about it this way. If you have a home and you never close the door, anyone can walk in. Strangers, thieves, people who mean well, people who mean harm, they all come in. And maybe you think, that makes me generous. That makes me open-hearted. But if your home is ransacked, if your food is gone, if your furniture is broken, how long can you survive? You can't. And eventually you'll have nothing left to give. But when you install a door, you suddenly have choice. You can open it wide for people you trust. You can close it to those who harm you. You can lock it when you need privacy. The door doesn't mean you're unloving. It means you've created the ability to decide. That is what a boundary is, the radical courage to decide who and what gets access to your soul. Now, here's the part that feels hard. The moment you start setting boundaries, people who have benefited from your lack of them will not applaud. They will resist. They will guilt you. They will call you cold, heartless, uncaring. Because boundaries disrupt the imbalance of power they've grown comfortable with. And here's where you need courage. Their anger is not evidence that your boundary is wrong. Their discomfort is not proof that you're selfish. It's proof that the system they built to exploit your niceness is crumbling. Boundaries require us to tolerate the discomfort of being misunderstood. And for people pleasers, that is excruciating. But ask yourself this: would you rather be temporarily misunderstood or perpetually mistreated? That question is the line between self-abandonment and self-respect. Let me say something else that matters deeply. Boundaries are not meant to keep everyone out. They are not meant to harden you, to close you off, or to lock you in bitterness. If your boundary feels like a prison, it's not a boundary. It's fear. Real boundaries are an act of love. They make relationships possible because they create safety. Without them, every connection is contaminated by resentment, by over-giving, by exhaustion. But with them, relationships can actually breathe. I've seen people heal when they finally understand this difference. A woman once told me, "I thought if I set boundaries, I'd lose everyone. But the people who loved me stayed. The people who only loved what I could do for them left. And what I realized was, I didn't lose anyone. I gained clarity." That's the gift of boundaries, clarity. You get to see who can meet you with respect and who only wanted access to your silence and compliance. You get to see who values you as a human being and who values you only as a resource. It hurts, yes, because sometimes the people who fall away are the ones you prayed would stay. But it also heals because now your love isn't wasted on people who only drain it. Boundaries are not about cruelty. They are about clarity. And clarity is kindness. Imagine telling someone, "Here's what's okay for me, and here's what's not okay." That's not mean. That's not unloving. That's a roadmap for how to be in a relationship with you. And anyone who refuses to honor that map isn't safe for you, no matter how much they insist they love you. So if you're listening to this and you've been terrified of setting a boundary, let me remind you, you are not selfish for wanting peace. You are not unkind for saying no. You are not cold for choosing rest over chaos. Boundaries are not rejection, they are redirection. They point your life toward health, toward respect, toward freedom. And maybe this is the hardest truth of all. Sometimes the most loving boundary is distance. Sometimes you can't keep the door cracked for someone who keeps storming in and wrecking the place. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is lock that door for good. That doesn't make you unforgiving. It makes you wise enough to know that some people will never respect access to your heart. So let's stop demonizing boundaries. Let's stop acting like the highest form of love is total self-abandonment. It's not. The highest form of love includes wisdom. It includes courage. It includes the discernment to know I can only give you what I can give myself. And if I don't have peace, respect, and love inside me, I have nothing true to offer you. That's why boundaries are not walls. Walls shut everyone out. Boundaries create a doorway through which only real love can enter, and through which harm has no key. And that, my friends, is how you build a life where you don't just survive people's demands, but where you actually thrive in the freedom of your own self-respect. One of the most exhausting things about dealing with a narcissist, or really, with anyone who refuses to see you clearly, is the endless explaining. You find yourself in conversation after conversation, trying to justify why you feel hurt, why you need a boundary, why you said no. You twist yourself into knots, rehearsing explanations, softening your tone, carefully choosing words so they won't get defensive. And yet, no matter how carefully you explain, no matter how much evidence you bring, they never seem to understand. And let me tell you the painful truth. They don't misunderstand you by accident. They misunderstand you on purpose. Because if they can keep you explaining yourself, they can keep you on the defensive. They can keep you spinning in circles, doubting your truth, questioning your own instincts. It's a trap. I can't tell you how many people have come to me saying, "I feel like I'm losing my mind." No matter what I say, they twist it. They make me feel like I'm the problem. And so I just keep explaining. Maybe if I explain it differently, maybe if I find the right words, they'll finally get it. But here's the thing. Someone committed to misunderstanding you will never hear your explanation. You could spend hours, days, even years trying, and the result will be the same. There's a story that comes to mind about a man who worked under a narcissistic boss. Every time he tried to assert himself, to set a boundary about working late, his boss would guilt him. "You're not a team player," the boss would say. "You don't care about the company. I thought you were committed." And this man, who truly cared about his work, would spend hours explaining, "I'm not lazy. I just need balance. I have a family. I've given so much already." But nothing changed. His boss wasn't listening to understand. He was listening to manipulate. And the more the man explained, the more power his boss had over him. That's the reality of over-explaining. It drains you of energy and gives more power to the very people who want to control you. At its core, the need to explain comes from a longing to be seen, to be understood, to be validated. That's a human need. We all want to feel heard. But with a narcissist, that need becomes a weapon used against you. The moment you realize this, everything shifts. You begin to see that explanations are not the same as boundaries. Boundaries are a statement of truth. This is okay for me. This is not okay for me. Explanations, on the other hand, are negotiations. They're invitations for someone else to argue, to twist, to dismantle your truth. And people who thrive on control will always accept that invitation. So what's the alternative? You stop explaining. You stop justifying. You stop handing over your energy to someone who has no intention of honoring it. Instead, you learn the power of brevity. You learn the courage of silence. You learn that a simple "now" is a complete sentence. At first, this feels impossible. If you're a recovering people pleaser, if you've spent years trying to keep the peace, the silence of not explaining feels unbearable. You think, what if they think I'm rude? What if they think I'm selfish? What if they're angry? But here's the paradox: every time you resist the urge to explain, you're teaching your nervous system that you can survive their disapproval. You don't need their understanding to stand in your truth. There's such freedom in this. Imagine someone questioning your decision, pushing back against your boundary, demanding a reason, and you simply saying, "That doesn't work for me," and stopping there. No long speech, no apology, just clarity. That's what real self-respect looks like. And yes, people will push back. They'll demand, why? Why not? What's the reason? And here's the thing: you don't owe anyone access to your reasoning. You don't owe them a detailed report of your inner life. If someone respects you, they'll accept your no. If someone doesn't, no explanation will ever be enough. I remember talking with a woman who finally set a boundary with her narcissistic parent. When they demanded to know why she wasn't coming over every weekend anymore, she simply said, "Because that doesn't work for me." The silence that followed was deafening. She told me, my whole body shook. I wanted so badly to explain, to say, "I love you, but I need space, but I'm still a good daughter." I wanted to fill the silence with proof of my love. But I didn't. And do you know what happened? Nothing. They got angry, sure, but I survived it. And I realized, I don't have to spend the rest of my life begging for permission to live in peace. That is the power of refusing to explain yourself. You take your power back. You reclaim your right to your own choices, your own needs, your own life. Now let me be clear. There is a difference between explaining to someone who loves you and explaining to someone who exploits you. In healthy relationships, we do share our reasons. We say, "Here's why I need this boundary," because mutual understanding builds intimacy. But when you're dealing with someone who repeatedly violates your boundaries, who refuses to honor your truth, Explanations are no longer intimacy. They are ammunition. And you don't have to hand someone ammunition to use against you. So here's the invitation: notice when you're over-explaining. Catch yourself when you start rehearsing long justifications in your head. Ask yourself, am I explaining because this person is safe and capable of hearing me? Or am I explaining because I'm afraid of their reaction? If it's the latter, stop, breathe, and practice saying less. The truth is, you don't need anyone else to agree with your boundary for it to be valid. Your boundary doesn't require their approval. It requires your courage. And courage isn't always loud. Sometimes courage is the quiet strength of holding your ground without over-explaining why. You are not responsible for managing other people's perceptions of you. You are responsible for living in alignment with your values, your peace, your worth. People who want to understand you will make the effort to. People who don't want to will never be convinced, no matter how many words you use. So stop handing over your power in the form of endless explanations. Because the moment you stop explaining yourself, you start trusting yourself. And that trust, that unshakable knowing that your needs matter, your truth matters, your boundaries matter, is what sets you free. For so many of us, the word love has been tangled up with the word pleasing. Somewhere along the way, we learned that the way to earn connection was to make ourselves easy, agreeable, and endlessly accommodating. We were taught that if we just kept everyone else happy, they would stay. They would choose us. They would finally give us the love and security we craved. And for a while, pleasing feels safe. Pleasing feels like control. If I do everything right, if I anticipate your needs, if I keep you comfortable, maybe you won't leave. But here's the brutal truth: pleasing doesn't create love. It creates imbalance. It creates exhaustion. It creates relationships where one person is constantly pouring and the other is constantly drinking. And when you're caught in a relationship with a narcissist, people pleasing is like oxygen for them. They thrive on it. They feed off your willingness to abandon yourself in order to keep them satisfied. I think about a woman who once told me that she spent years in a marriage where she measured her worth by her husband's moods. If he came home angry, she rushed to soothe him. If he was cold, she tried harder, cooked better, stayed quieter. If he criticized her, she apologized, even when she hadn't done anything wrong. She said, "I thought love meant making sure he was never unhappy. But no matter how much I gave, it was never enough." And that's the truth about pleasing. It's a bottomless pit. You could spend your whole life trying, and it will never fill the void in someone who only wants more. That's why the shift from pleasing to protecting is so powerful. Protecting doesn't mean you stop caring. It doesn't mean you stop being loving or generous. Protecting means you finally recognize that your life, your time, your heart are worth guarding. It means you stop asking, "What do I need to do to keep them happy?" And you start asking, "What do I need to do to keep myself whole?" This shift is not easy because it feels like betrayal at first. If you've spent years equating self-worth with other people's approval, choosing to protect yourself feels selfish. It feels wrong. You worry, what if they call me cold? What if they walk away? What if I lose everything I've worked for just because I stopped pleasing? And I want to tell you, those are not signs that you're doing something wrong. Those are signs that you're finally breaking free from a system designed to keep you small. Protecting looks like saying no to things that deplete you, even when others expect your yes. Protecting looks like leaving a conversation when someone is gaslighting you instead of trying to argue them into seeing your truth. Protecting looks like resting when your body is begging for it, even if someone calls you lazy. Protecting looks like choosing peace over chaos, even when chaos is what's familiar. One of the hardest but most liberating lessons you will ever learn is that not everyone will like the version of you that protects yourself. The people who loved you because you pleased them will resist. They will accuse you of changing. They will say you're not as kind, not as giving, not as easy to be around. And you will have to decide whose opinion matters more, theirs or your own. I think about the people I've seen go through this transformation. At first, it's shaky. They say no with trembling voices. They walk away with tears in their eyes. They second-guess every boundary, every moment of self-protection. But then something incredible happens. They begin to notice the freedom. They notice the space opening up in their lives. They notice that while they may have lost the approval of people who exploited them, they've gained the respect of people who truly love them. And most importantly, they've gained their own self-respect. Because here's the thing, when you live to please, you are always at the mercy of someone else's opinion. You can do everything right, and if they're in a bad mood, you lose. You can sacrifice your needs completely, and if they're still dissatisfied, you feel like a failure. But when you live to protect, you anchor your worth inside yourself. You stop measuring it by other people's reactions. You start measuring it by your own alignment with truth, with peace, with integrity. Protecting is not about building armor. It's not about becoming hardened or bitter. It's about realizing that your soul deserves safety. Your heart deserves care. Your life deserves to be lived on your terms, not constantly rearranged to appease someone else's demands. Protecting says, I am responsible for my well-being. I cannot hand that responsibility over to anyone else, no matter how much I love them. So, how do you begin this shift? You start small. You notice the moments where you want to say yes, but your whole body is screaming no. And instead of betraying yourself, you try saying no. You notice when you're about to write a long message, defending a choice you already know is right. And instead, you delete the explanation and let the choice stand. You notice when you're apologizing for something that doesn't require an apology, and you stop. Those tiny acts of protection add up. They build muscle. They teach your nervous system that you can survive disapproval, that you can survive discomfort, that you don't need to bleed yourself dry in order to be loved. And the beautiful thing, once you begin protecting, your capacity for authentic love actually grows. Because you're no longer loving from fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of disapproval. You're loving from a place of security. You're no longer pouring from an empty cup. You're offering from overflow. That's the difference between pleasing and protecting. Pleasing depletes you, protecting sustains you. Let me remind you of this truth. Love is not proven by how much you can endure. It's not proven by how much of yourself you can give up. Love is proven in how much truth and respect it holds. And you cannot have real love if you are constantly betraying yourself to maintain it. So today, I want you to ask yourself a question: am I living to please, or am I living to protect? Am I giving because I want to, or because I'm afraid of what will happen if I don't? Am I bending out of generosity, or am I breaking because I don't believe I have a choice? The shift is not easy, but it is holy. It is the work of reclaiming your life, your dignity, your freedom. And when you make that shift, you don't just survive toxic dynamics. You create the possibility of something better. You create the space for relationships that honor who you truly are. You create a life where your love isn't a performance but a choice, offered freely, without fear. And that, my friends, is the kind of love worth living for. When we talk about self-respect, it can feel like a lofty idea, something we all know we should value, but in practice, it gets tangled in fear, shame, and the longing to be loved. Especially when we've been in relationships with narcissistic people, approval becomes like a drug. We crave it, we wait for it, we chase it. And here's the painful truth: that craving isn't because we're weak. It's because somewhere along the way, we were taught that love was conditional. We were taught that if we performed well enough, behaved well enough, or sacrificed enough, then we'd finally be deemed worthy. But living this way is exhausting. It strips us of our power and convinces us that our value rests in the hands of someone else. A narcissist feeds off this longing for approval. They offer little breadcrumbs of validation to keep you hooked, and then they pull it away to keep you desperate. It's a cruel cycle that erodes self-esteem over time, and the cost is enormous. You stop listening to your inner voice. You second-guess yourself. You betray your instincts in order to keep someone else happy. And yet, even with all of that sacrifice, you never get the steady love you're chasing. Approval in this context is a leash, and the more you chase it, the tighter it pulls. Self-respect, though, is freedom. Self-respect means you stop asking, "Do they approve of me?" and start asking, "Am I proud of the way I am living my life?" Self-respect means you no longer shrink yourself to fit someone else's idea of who you should be. It means you honor your own truth, even if it makes others uncomfortable. But let's be real, choosing self-respect over approval is not easy. It's a practice that asks us to tolerate discomfort. It requires us to sit with the silence that comes when we stop begging for validation. It forces us to face the possibility that people will call us selfish, cold, or unkind when we finally put ourselves first. That fear can feel paralyzing. And yet, it is in that very moment, the moment you choose yourself, that you begin to reclaim your power. Think about it this way: when you are consumed with chasing approval, you're essentially handing the keys to your self-worth over to someone else. You are saying, "You decide if I'm valuable today. You decide if I'm worthy of love." That's a dangerous place to live, because narcissistic people will use that key to control you. They'll withhold affection when they want power. They'll dole out praise when they want something from you. And the entire time, you're left running on a treadmill that never stops. Self-respect is when you take those keys back. It's when you decide, "I'm no longer renting out my worth to people who don't have the capacity to honor it." You begin to see yourself as someone deserving of care, love, and dignity without having to earn it by performing, pleasing, or sacrificing. That shift is life-changing. One of the most profound truths I've learned in my own research and work is this: the people who truly love you do not need you to betray yourself to be worthy of their affection. Real love doesn't demand that you constantly prove yourself. Real love celebrates your boundaries, your truth, and your wholeness. Narcissists don't offer that kind of love. But here's the gift: they don't have to, because you can offer it to yourself. Choosing self-respect over approval also changes the way you show up in the world. When you no longer live for someone else's praise, you stop performing and start living authentically. You say what you mean, and you mean what you say. You surround yourself with people who see you, not because you've bent yourself into a shape that pleases them, but because you stand tall in your own skin. Of course, there will be losses along the way. When you stop prioritizing approval, some people will walk away, especially those who benefited from your constant people-pleasing. That's painful. It feels like rejection, but in truth, it's liberation. Because the people who leave when you stand in your self-respect were never truly connected to you. They were connected to the version of you they could control. Letting them go creates space. Space for healthier relationships, space for peace, space for your own voice to finally be heard. And as that space opens, something extraordinary happens. You begin to feel at home in yourself. For the first time, you realize you don't need permission to take up space, to have opinions, to draw lines, to live boldly. Here's the paradox: when you stop seeking approval, you become far more powerful in your relationships. You show up with a quiet confidence that doesn't need to scream or beg. You know what you deserve, and you no longer settle for less. And that strength naturally draws the right people to you. The kind of people who value you not for what you can give them, but for who you are. But this choice, self-respect over approval, isn't a one-time decision. It's a daily practice. Every time you are tempted to bite your tongue so someone else won't be upset, you're faced with the choice again. Every time you feel the pull to over-explain, over-give, or over-apologize, you're faced with the choice again. And every time you choose your dignity, you strengthen that muscle. In the end, the question is this: do you want to live your life chained to someone else's approval, or do you want to live free in the strength of your own respect? Approval is temporary, fragile, and conditional. Self-respect is steady, grounding, and unconditional. So stop begging for scraps of love from people incapable of giving it. Stop waiting for someone else to stamp you as worthy. Choose yourself. Choose respect. Because once you know how it feels to live in your own dignity, you'll never again trade it for someone else's shallow approval. That is the beginning of true freedom. Here's the truth, my friends. You don't have to keep pouring yourself into someone who only drains you. You don't have to keep smiling while you're bleeding inside. Stop being nice to a narcissist. Start being loyal to yourself. Because the bravest love you will ever practice is not the love you give to others. It's the love you finally give to yourself.